The gavel struck the wooden block with a sharp crack that echoed across the dusty square, and in that instant the world seemed to hold its breath. $2. That was all it took for the crowd to turn away, satisfied, as if nothing of value had changed hands. But the girl standing on the platform did not lower her eyes or shrink from the stares. She lifted her chin, her dark eyes steady and unafraid, and spoke words that cut deeper than any blade. "You will regret this," she said calmly. "I don't belong to you." The man who had raised his hand felt a strange chill run through him, though he didn't yet understand why. Her name was not spoken at the auction, because names made people remember humanity. To the auctioneer, she was just another item seized after a broken treaty, another problem to be removed. But she was Apache, born of wide skies and red earth, raised on stories of honor, courage, and freedom. Even as chains rested lightly on her wrists, her spirit stood unbound. The crowd mistook her silence for surrender, never realizing that storms often gather quietly. The man who bought her was called Elias Turner, a trader who had come west chasing profit and peace after years of loss. He told himself he was different from others, that he would treat her kindly, perhaps even set her free someday. $2 was nothing to him, but to his restless conscience, it felt like an attempt to fix something broken inside. When he met her gaze, he expected fear or anger. What he saw instead was certainty. It unsettled him more than shouting ever could. As they left the square, the girl walked with measured steps, her back straight. She did not stumble, though the road was rough, and she did not speak again. Elias noticed how people stared, some with pity, others with approval. He wondered which look he deserved. That night, as they reached his small homestead on the edge of the valley, he pointed to a separate room and told her she could rest there. He spoke gently, hoping his kindness would erase the ugliness of the day. She listened, expression unreadable, then said softly, "Kindness does not turn wrong into right." Days passed, heavy with unspoken tension. Elias offered food, work, and space, trying to convince himself, and her, that this arrangement could be harmless. She helped in the garden, repaired tools with skilled hands, and sang low songs in a language he did not understand. Each song seemed to carry the wind, and sometimes, he could swear the land itself leaned closer to listen. At night, he dreamed of the auction gavel striking again and again, each blow louder than the last. She finally spoke more one evening as the sun dipped behind the hills. She told him about her people, about her mother who taught her to read the stars and her grandfather who said freedom was a responsibility, not a gift. "You think buying me saved me from worse," she said, meeting his eyes. "But you cannot own what was never meant to be owned." Elias felt the truth of her words settle like a weight on his chest. For the first time, he began to see the harm he had wrapped in good intentions. Trouble came soon after. Soldiers rode through the valley, searching for runaways and enforcing laws that favored power over justice. When they saw the Apache girl at Elias's land, they assumed ownership meant control. They demanded papers, obedience, silence. She stood firm, refusing to bow her head. Her courage drew their anger, and Elias was forced to choose between comfort and conscience. In that moment, he understood what regret truly meant. He stood between her and the soldiers, his voice shaking but resolute. He said she was free, that he would not hand her over, that what happened at the auction was wrong. The soldiers laughed, reminding him of the law. But laws, Elias realized, were written by men, and men could be wrong. When they threatened him with punishment, he felt fear, but behind it rose something stronger, respect for the girl who had never once pretended to be less than she was. The confrontation ended with the soldiers leaving, promising to return. That night, Elias and the Apache girl sat by a small fire. He apologized, not with excuses, but with honesty. He told her he would help her return to her people, no matter the cost. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Regret can teach," she said. "If you listen." The journey back was dangerous. They traveled by night, avoiding patrols and relying on her knowledge of the land. Along the way, Elias learned to listen, to the wind, to the ground beneath his boots, and to the stories she shared. He learned that respect was not something you declared, but something you practiced. Slowly, the distance between them changed, not into ownership, but into understanding. When they finally reached Apache land, dawn painted the sky in colors Elias had never noticed before. Members of her tribe emerged, cautious but proud. She stepped forward, free and unchained, and for the first time, she smiled. Not a smile of relief alone, but of victory. Elias felt tears sting his eyes, knowing he would leave changed forever. Before he turned away, she spoke once more. "Remember this," she said. "Freedom is not something you give. It is something you stop taking." With that, she walked back to her people, strong and unbroken. Elias returned to his homestead a different man. He sold what he had gained through unfair trade and used the money to help others harmed by the same system that had once benefited him. He spoke out, even when it cost him. And every time doubt crept in, he remembered the girl at the auction, her steady eyes, and the words that had begun his awakening. The story spread quietly, carried by travelers and whispered at campfires. Not as a tale of ownership, but as a reminder. You can buy silence. You can buy time. But you can never buy a human soul. And sometimes, the smallest act, a raised hand, $2, a single sentence, can begin a journey toward justice, if you are brave enough to listen when someone says, "I don't belong to you." Elias Turner's life never returned to what it once was. After leaving the Apache lands, silence followed him like a shadow. The valley that had once felt calm now reminded him of every wrong he had ignored. Each morning as the sun rose, he heard her words again in his mind, "Freedom is not something you give. It is something you stop taking." That sentence became a quiet judge, shaping every choice he made afterward. As months passed, the frontier grew more violent. Auctions continued. Treaties were broken as easily as promises whispered in the dark. Elias could no longer pretend it was none of his concern. He began traveling to nearby towns, telling people what he had witnessed, how fear was sold as law, how human lives were reduced to numbers and coins. Many laughed at him, some called him foolish, but a few listened. And those few began to question what they had always accepted as normal. One evening, a familiar fear returned. Soldiers rode through his valley again, asking questions, searching for troublemakers. This time, Elias did not hide. He spoke openly, knowing the risk. He was warned to stay silent, to mind his business. But once a man has seen truth, silence becomes a heavier burden than punishment. Though they left him unharmed, he knew eyes were watching him now. Far away, the Apache girl, now back among her people, was walking a different path. She was no longer just a daughter of the tribe, but a voice. Elders listened as she spoke of captivity, of false kindness, and of a man who had chosen to change instead of look away. Her story reminded her people that resistance was not always fought with weapons, sometimes it was fought with memory and truth. Seasons changed. One harsh winter, word reached Elias that violence was spreading closer to Apache land. Without hesitation, he gathered supplies and made the journey again, not as an owner, not as a savior, but as an ally. When he arrived, he was met with caution, then recognition. The girl stepped forward, older now, stronger, her presence steady. She did not thank him. She did not need to. Her trust, offered carefully, meant more than gratitude ever could. Together, they worked to protect families forced to flee, guiding them through safe routes, sharing food, sharing knowledge. Elias learned that real redemption is not a single brave act, it is a lifetime of choosing what is right when no reward is promised. He no longer measured his worth by profit, but by the lives he helped stand a little taller. Years later, long after Elias's hair had turned gray, people still told the story. Not of a man who bought a girl for $2, but of a man who learned that regret can become responsibility. And of an Apache girl who refused to be owned, who spoke one sentence that awakened a conscience.